Hello, class. Today we're going to talk about Bill Clinton, President of the United States. All right, so Bill Clinton was born in 1946 in a town called Hope, a small town in Arkansas, something he's going to allude to multiple times. And he is one of three presidents that we've had that were born in the summer of 1946. George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump are all basically the exact same age. And Bill Clinton was the son of William Jefferson Blythe Jr. This is a guy that had more than one marriage, multiple kids. And he is the biological father of Bill Clinton. And he died in a car accident right before Bill Clinton is born. And so Bill Clinton ends up taking the last name of his stepfather. Just was like, with Gerald Ford, it's like, he's related to any of the famous Fords? Nope, he wasn't born Ford. Bill Clinton, related to any of the famous Clintons? Nope, he wasn't born a Clinton. So he grew up in Arkansas. When he was a teenager, he got to go to the White House, and he met President Kennedy. I just love photos of presidents meeting in non-political circumstances. And he went to college, and when he was at college, he met Hillary Rodham. Now, Bill Clinton was an Arkansas Democrat, and his future wife Hillary was actually the head of the Young College Republicans when they first met. So they got married in 1975. In 1976, Bill Clinton is elected Attorney General of Arkansas. He is only 30 years old. And Arkansas at the time was a state that was dominated by Democrats at almost every level. And then so you'd have liberal, moderate, conservatives all within this party. And so while the Republicans contested the presidential race and the governor's race, he actually ran against no one for Attorney General. One of the quirks of the Old South, though, was every 2 years there are elections. So in 1978, Bill Clinton ran for governor of Arkansas and was elected with 63% of the vote. He's up for re-election 2 years later, and he gets swept out in the Reagan landslide. Carter actually does a little bit better than him in the state, but it's just this general thing. So he loses to Republican Frank White with 48% of the vote in 1980. In 1980, Clinton is the comeback kid. He runs again, and he wins without Reagan on the ballot, with 55% of the vote, beating out Craig. And then he wins re-election 3 times. Because he get re-elected every 2 years. So 1984, 86, 88. Frank Wright, the Republican, ran against him one of those times again, and Clinton kind of blew him out of the water. So he keeps on winning re-election here after being out 1 point, but he's still quite young for a politician. And in 1988, he gives the nominating speech for Michael Dukakis at the Democratic National Committee. And he's just supposed to be the hype man that says, hey, you should vote for Dukakis. This is why he's great. Right? And he just goes on, and his speech is very poorly received. But before the 1992 election, almost no one outside of Arkansas knew who Bill Clinton was. And if they knew who Bill Clinton was, it was because he had bombed in his one time in front of a national audience. So, coming off of the Persian Gulf War, when George H.W. Bush had nearly a 90% approval rating, no one could have predicted who was going to defeat him in a few short years. Right? So there is a big old contested Democratic primary in 1992. And one of the kind of quirks that's in this is that Iowa Senator Tom Harkin is running for president. And so this puts an entire little asterisk on what's the first nominating contest in the Iowa caucuses. No one really tries to protect Harkin because he's going to have this home team advantage. It goes to New Hampshire primary, and Bill Clinton doesn't even win this. He actually gets second place. But he goes and gives this speech in which he calls himself the comeback kid. And if you present like you have momentum, sometimes momentum simply materializes. And so Bill Clinton is going to win the nomination. And this is the second time we're going to have a rather obscure Southern governor end up becoming president of the United States. And he picks Al Gore as his running mate. And Al Gore was actually kind of a weird choice because typically you want a situation in which there's a balance to the ticket. But Bill Clinton is a moderate Southerner, and he picks another moderate Southerner in Al Gore, who also is around his same age. They're going to be the first baby boomers run for president. And it's a three-way election this time, right? Because we have George H.W. Bush and Ross Perot. Of course, Bill Clinton wins. And he becomes president of the United States. And this is the first time the Democrats have lost the last three presidential elections. So going in, was the first time in quite a while that there has been a Democratic trifecta in Congress. And there was a response to Clinton's policies that results in one of the worst midterms the president has had. In 1984, there's the Republican Revolution. And Republicans take control of Congress for the first time in 40 years. And that was a case where it was only in the power with Eisenhower for only 2 years. So it's been, the Democrats have been controlling the House almost unilaterally for 60 years at this point. This is backlash. And so suddenly he is sharing power, which results in a government shutdown. Okay, two of them in 1995 and 1996, in which a very large amount of employees are furloughed, in which they are technically still employed, but they're told don't come to work. And those that are essential employees of the government are working but not getting paid. And so there's this back and forth between him and the Republican leaders in Congress. And the public ultimately ends up seeing the Republicans as being the one more responsible for the shutdown than Clinton, and they kind of acquiesce on this point. And so, still, an enormous amount of strides had been made in the midterms as a backlash to Clinton's policies. So you have the 1996 presidential election, and there's a lot of people that are gunning for Clinton's spot. And the one who's going to ultimately get this is Bob Dole. Kansas Senator Bob Dole, a conservative who had run for president several times in the past unsuccessfully. He had been Gerald Ford's running mate in 1976. And he also, at this point, is 73. And so there was a lot of commentary about his age compared to Bill Clinton. Them going back and forth. And and Bob Dole is a war hero from World War II, and he picked former quarterback Jack Kemp, who's a bit younger than him, as his running mate. And this time is only a two-way debate. Ross Perot isn't considered part of it, and Bill Clinton is reelected. He picks up a couple states, he loses a couple states in 1996. He is reelected with 49% of the vote by a significant part of the Electoral College. And that's just the nature of the Electoral College, is that because of some vote splitting, Bill Clinton has two pretty clear-cut Electoral College victories when he never hits 50% of the vote. And we can look at the shifts and between the elections, and there's a bunch of different directions that are occurring. Bob Dole was from Kansas, so we have a strong pull there, but Bill Clinton makes a lot of inroads in the Midwest while losing some in the South. And one thing that benefits Bill Clinton, though, is the decline of Ross Perot, who's going to be going from getting almost 20% of the vote to about 8% of the vote in this changing dynamics. Another thing that Bill Clinton's going to have to deal with is some domestic terrorism. There's going to be the Oklahoma City bombings. This dual thing done between two white supremacists, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, who had both been radicalized against the government and part of these anti-government groups, and high-profile government raids at like Ruby Ridge in Waco, Texas. And so they choose April 19th as specifically as a nod to Waco. So we have the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And this is a federal building named after a federal judge. It had a bunch of these regional areas for agencies in it. So April 1995, McVeigh parked a rented truck next to the federal building with a bomb, in which he remotely detonated at 9:02 a.m. This is not a suicide bombing. This killed 168 people and injured more than 680, and it was right next to a daycare. Okay, just horrendous. And then Bill Clinton has to console the nation after this occurs. And this is not the only time that something like this will happen. In 1996, the U.S. has the Olympics. They're going to be hosted in Atlanta, Centennial Park. And so that was all set up for it. And a bomb is set up right before the Olympics are going to go on. And a security guard, Richard Jewell, goes and he discovers it, and he evacuates most of the area, and so almost nobody ends up dying in this incident right before the Olympics. But it's something that Bill Clinton is having to deal with. The guy that ends up doing it was mad about abortion policy. Right? The guy that did Oklahoma City bombings was mad about the federal government. Right? So there's several different things that are occurring here. So there's a bunch of policies that Bill Clinton is going to try to enact. Okay? And a lot of these policies are going to end up occurring during the first term because he had a more willing Congress. Is the Family and Medical Leave Act, or the FMLA leave. And this is basically we're the only major developed country that doesn't have any type of paid parental leave legally. However, you can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave from your job, where your job has to keep your position for you. Okay, and this could be for childcare, taking care of a family member recovering from illness. Okay, and this is something that had been vetoed in the past by former President Bush. And It wins the votes override. So Bill Clinton's going through with that. He signed the Brady Bill. This is a bill that created a federal background checks for gun purchases and had a list of reasons why you might be denied for it. Okay. And it doesn't mean you automatically get denied if you have any one of these reasons, but it can be part of it. If you have previously been convicted of a felony and served over 1 year in jail, if you have been dishonorably discharged from the U.S. military, if you had a restraining order for stalking or harassment, if you had been committed to a mental institution, or if you had unlawfully entered the United States. Also was instrumental in the 1994 crime bill. And there's several elements of this crime bill. One is this idea they're trying to get tougher on crime. Was a 3 strikes you're out policy, in which your previous offenses add up. So in theory, someone could be continuously caught for a minor offense such as shoplifting, okay, and be sentenced to the same amount in jail, get out, do it again and again. Right? So the theory here, like 3 strikes you're out, is that these add up. It's different if you're a first-time offender, so you go 3 times, and the 3rd time you get a mandatory minimum sentence. This also led to the creation of the sex offender registry. It also allows the expanded use of the death penalty for crimes such as terrorism, hate crimes, and cop killings during this time. And this was a result of, in the 1980s, especially 1988, for that election, they're able to kind of peg the Democratic nominee Mike Dukakis as being soft on crime, as that being a political weakness. So Bill Clinton kind of neutralizes this with the crime bill, though there have been some effects of it that people have criticized. Also had the assault weapons ban, which banned the use of certain semi-automatic firearms that were defined as assault weapons, as well as certain ammunition magazines that were defined as large capacity. Right. Now, this grandfathered all weapons made before 1994 and had the support of former President Ford, Carter, and Reagan. Now, there was a sunset provision, which meant that it would go away after 10 years, and so it had to be reauthorized in 2004. It was not reauthorized in 2004, so it went away. Right, so there were the banning of these weapons at the time, right, which with the crime bill did show a decrease of violent crime during that time. Though there's all these other factors that can be involved. You signed the Violence Against Women Act. It's basically this idea is that crimes against women, specifically domestic abuse, were not being followed up as well as they should be. So the act provided billions of dollars in grants towards this investigating and prosecuting violent crimes against women, and imposed automatic and mandatory restitution for those convicted. And it set up an office within the Justice Department for this. Now, it also had this provision that gets called unconstitutional that allowed people to basically sue police departments if they didn't do their job with domestic abuse. And the Supreme Court's not going to allow that. Now, this has had to be reauthorized several times, so the current law looks a little bit different, but it is back in effect. The first laws dealing with the internet are going to occur during this time. And a lot of what we do with the internet is still regulated by laws signed by Bill Clinton. And so we have Section 230, which basically is giving some civil immunity from websites, that they are not responsible for all the content that is posted on them. And so when I post this to YouTube, okay, some of this is opinion based and is saying that like YouTube is not endorsing my views of the Bill Clinton presidency, how I am portraying them right now. And though it's resulted in being a seriously misunderstood law. There's also the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. And this is a law that was made because in the past, there really wasn't anything that protected your health information. So when doing this in class, I've explained that, like, in the past, you have a situation where a student says, "I'm sorry, I missed school. I was sick, right? And I was at the doctor." In the past, I could have called the doctor up and said, "What did so and so come to the doctor? What was their issue?" And the doctor could have told me. It would have been legal. This does is protects your health information. Okay. And so that they can't sell it to other places and they can't give the information out. So if I call up the doctor and I say, "Did so-and-so go to the doctor today? Do they have these symptoms?" They're going to say, "I can't tell you." You have control of your health information, which means if you want to divulge a piece of information, you can. Okay? Athletes do this all the time about their medical conditions. Okay? But it's up to you. It's not up to someone else. Congress will pass the Defense of Marriage Act, which is something that Bill Clinton is actually not even for. He's opposed to it. This banned the federal recognition of same-sex marriages by defining the definition of marriage as between one man and one woman. Now, at the time, there weren't any states that had same-sex marriage, which is part of why Bill Clinton said this was unnecessary, but it passed with such lopsided margins in the House and the Senate, he doesn't bother vetoing it. Eventually, the Supreme Court will rule the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional, and it will be supplanted by the Respect for Marriage Act in 2022. Bill Clinton will also implement a policy called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In the past, you could be dishonorably discharged from the U.S. military for being openly gay. And this had negative implications. For example, with the Brady Bill, one of the reasons that you could be denied getting a weapon is if you have been dishonorably discharged from the U.S. military. And so, right, so someone gets kicked out for being gay, right? That could stop them from having a gun later in life, part of their constitutional rights. So, Don't Ask, Don't Tell said that they're not going to investigate what you do to your private life, but your private life's your private life. It's not going to be public. Right? This policy has been repealed under President Obama. He is going to get 2 Supreme Court justices to be able to appoint. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the second woman in the court, was confirmed 96-3, followed by Stephen Breyer, who just retired recently, was confirmed 87-9. He also appoints a bunch of lower judges, future Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, as well as Marianne Trump Berry, the sister of future President Donald Trump. So we can't talk about Bill Clinton without talking about a major scandal, right? which results in impeachment, Monica Lewinsky. So during the government shutdown, most of the workers of the White House left, and they were replaced by unpaid interns. And one of those interns was Monica Lewinsky. And Bill Clinton ends up having an inappropriate extramarital relationship with Monica Lewinsky. This was not the first time in his life that he had been unfaithful to his wife. This had come up in the past for this. And this is a really brazen thing because something going on. One is he was being investigated by a special prosecutor, Ken Starr, who was looking into a failed real estate deal called Whitewater from Arkansas. And the public didn't quite understand Whitewater, but Ken Starr is investigating it, right? He's already being investigated. And what ends up happening is he gets sent tapes by this woman, Linda Tripp. Linda Tripp was someone that worked at the Pentagon, and she ends up being right next to Monica Lewinsky, who starts telling her all this stuff. And there's a significant age gap between them, right? So there's a bit of a mother-daughter dynamic going on. And she figures out, Monica Lewinsky doesn't come out and say, oh, it's the President of the United States, but based on context clues, that the only person Monica Lewinsky could be referring to when she talks about her boyfriend is the President of the United States. So she starts having Monica Lewinsky call her and starts recording what's being said. And of course, her friend doesn't know this and sends these tapes to Ken Starr. And Ken Starr does not initially really care about this. He already thinks very poorly of Bill Clinton as an individual, but he's trying to look for criminal wrongdoing. But there's several things like that. One is Bill Clinton has to go testify in court, civil court, over a sexual harassment case of Paula Jones, a former employee of the Arkansas government. And during this time, he is asked about his past relationships when he's under oath. And when they ask him about Monica Lewinsky, and he lies. Right? So these things kind of all come unraveling, and it eventually results in impeachment, which is the first impeachment since Andrew Johnson. So there's no one with a living memory of impeachment. So there's all the charges from the Republican House of perjury and obstruction of justice and abuse of power. And two of these passed, perjury and obstruction of justice, mostly on party lines. And so this goes to the Senate. And basically the dispute here is most people agree what Bill Clinton did was wrong. Is it worthy of removing him from being president? Okay. And so as the result there, Bill Clinton is acquitted. Okay. There wasn't much suspense here because you need 67 votes to remove someone from office. And that would require a significant amount of Democrats to cross over. But it's 50-50 on obstruction of justice, 45-55 on perjury. So Bill Clinton is able to stay in office. Right? And is able to stay in office. But it does, affect his legacy. And so Bill Clinton has had life since then, right? So in 2000, First Lady Hillary Clinton was elected senator from New York. And so at the very end of Bill Clinton's presidency, she is both First Lady and senator. She later is going to twice run for president. First time she loses the Democratic nomination, second time she wins, but she loses the general election. So Bill Clinton is still around. His story is still unwritten. And he was a marked difference from the presidents that had preceded him. And so he defeats George H.W. Bush and is succeeded by George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush. So, stuff that I left out, but this video is getting pretty long. That's what I have about Bill Clinton. I hope you like it. Have a good day.